Did I hear me?
We're live.
We're live, okay. Good evening, everybody. I want to welcome everybody. Before we start our meeting, let's stand for the pledge and for a prayer.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Father, we come to you tonight. We thank you for this opportunity to be together as a board and administration to make decisions for the district. And we thank you for the protection that you've offered the kids and the staff here over this first few weeks of school. We pray that you would continue to do that and that you would just keep COVID issues at bay and that our teachers would find the strength and stamina to continue on with their work. Thank you for this board that's assembled here and help us to make wise decisions tonight. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay, so let's get started. Our first item on here is our consent agenda items. All of the board members have had a chance to review these items. Does anybody have any questions on these? Okay. If there's no questions, we're going to consider them approved by unanimous consent. We'll move on to our superintendent's update.
If you could maybe pull up the year-to-date summary. This might kind of give you a segue into tonight's meeting as far as year-to-date 2021. Kind of listed the opening balances in a couple different locations. If you look on the left-hand side, reviewing Fund 2 at 2.9 million, Fund 3 at 1.3. The QSCAB is a continuous growing fund until payment is complete. That is reserve funds that are not allocated for us to access. The 1.3 million, of course, is. If you continue on down, you can see Fund 6 at 419. Fund 7 is our activity fund, and then Fund 8 is our food service fund. So you can kind of see the opening of those. We'll be covering a historical perspective of fund balances a little later in the meeting. We'll kind of look at some transfers within the meeting, but you might see in Fund 3 there where it says non-revenue, that $567,000 is a rough, it's pretty close approximation to the amount of interest that we saved when we refinanced the bonds. And so in the budgetary design of 2021, I went ahead and created a reflection of a transfer from the building fund at 2.9 million because the building fund has to be lower than 2.9 million to be within the 20% reserve ratio.
Not the building. Did you
The
say?
operational fund, Fund 2, is at 2.9 million, so we have to be below, it cannot exceed roughly 2.7 million, is kind of that threshold. So we've chosen to kind of balance out what's available in the Fund 2 as well as what's available in Fund 3, and so we'll further discuss that, maybe try to address some questions when we get into the meeting this evening. The reflective action of our fund balances for the open. When we closed out the year, you can see that full picture. The cash balance when we opened on July 1 was $6.1 million. And that's the bottom line on the left-hand side, total of all funds. That's when we opened in July. So we'll continue to kind of move forward and you kind of review that at your own discretion. The next item that I have there is relevant to the COVID task force. And I'm going to take this off because I can't project enough to be heard. Talking about the COVID task force, we meet on a weekly basis in a Zoom, and that's county level individuals along with hospitals, educators, the Department of Health, and so we kind of review where we're at locally here in Garland County. The other item that I attached there is school data statewide. To make the list associated with a data point for active COVID cases, you have to exceed 5. Fountain Lake has not had 5 active cases since we opened the school year. At different times we've got close, but we've not had enough to actually place us on that list at any point in time. Some of your larger districts, noticed Lake Hamilton is currently on there, others, but that's a website that you can kind of see any school district in the state relevant to that content. Is that not opening, Mr. Campbell?
No, sir.
I couldn't get it to open either.
I don't even have it. Which one you talking about?
It's called the School Data Statewide. I'll go in and check it. It's through the ACHI. I opened it earlier tonight. I don't know what's wrong with it right now, so I didn't test it.
I haven't tested it past the tab.
It took quite a while. Their servers may be slow, but
Okay.
mine finally came through.
Did it come through?
Slowly.
What it does is it lets you see the geographic boundary of a district, and then it talks about the active cases, cumulative
I'm
cases.
refreshing yours.
It would actually show quarantine, but it will not show any of those values unless that school district has more than 5 active cases. So it's covering 5 active cases and above. If we're less than that threshold of 5, you won't see any data pertaining to your district. We have approximately just short of 20 students that I would say are quarantined currently at secondary level, maybe 1 additional student at the middle school level based on an active case. And we've seen that involve the elementary school, middle school, and the high school at different times since the opening of the school year. So I just wanted to pause at this point. Our team has done an outstanding job of looking at seating charts, visiting with test positive to determine who would be a probable close contact. Here again, a probable close contact is anyone that's consistently within 6 feet of another, inside of 6 feet of another individual for 15 minutes in a 24-hour period of time. So, you know, you can become a probable close contact and never be infected, but it's a precautionary measure, and those individual students or staff members are either eligible as a staff member for COVID leave or working from home, and an individual student pivots their instruction to work virtually until they can return based on the quarantine date of 14 full days. So, anybody have any questions pertaining to that? We've tried to, I've kind of worked with the Sentinel Record, tried to communicate with them, to get some information out publicly to the community. We've also tried to use some different methods with Aptigee there, but it's going to take time for the community to truly understand the expectations of the school in this context. Anybody have any questions? The next item is kind of how we're handling the census. The census has gotten lost in a pandemic. And if we're not careful, we're going to find that the census data will not be accurately reflective of our area. I was visiting with Jim Zahn, even in the village where most people engage in those processes was running less than 65% in the village. So the local community and working with the Hot Springs area, we really need people to re-engage with the census process. We're uncertain if the timeline is going to be extended, but this does set the baseline for the next 10 years when it comes to potentially federal educational funding, other related categorical funding. So you need to, you know, as we endure the pandemic, we've got to remind people that it's very important for them to complete census data as an individual household. So really just wanted to put a plug out there for our community to talk to their friends, talk to their neighbors, because at the conclusion of this, it could not only affect education, but transportation, highway funding. Everything is distributed based on census data when it comes to the federal government. And in often instances, the state government relies on that census data as well for distribution models. The next item that we have in the superintendent's update is indoor and outdoor events. We had to submit this to the AAA, and you can kind of look at that. We seat every other row, try to have spacing among families. encourage everyone to wear a face covering. Along with that, we try to pre-sell, let me restate that. We provide an opportunity for a voucher, which it gives you the opportunity to purchase a ticket on game day. And depending on when we go on the road, some schools are using the voucher system, other schools are doing a cash purchase, such as I think we're going to Robinson this week, and that's a cash purchase ticket. We try to provide at the first of the week opportunities for family members of players to get the first vouchers so that they're, we know, allowed to attend the event, and then we continue to expand that to eventually allow community to attend. In our second game, Coach, at home, did we have tickets remaining, or did we sell out?
We had 17.
So we had 17 tickets that remained available at the conclusion of the game a week ago Friday. So that gives you an idea if you've attended an event or not attended an event, not knowing if there would be space. You can definitely check on game day to purchase tickets, and the ticket then is taken up to the field house. Indoor events, would you say very similar?
No, it's varying because depending upon who we're playing and the crowd that they would bring.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've only done it one time that we done the pre-sale.
Okay, so you've been able to pretty much purchase the ticket the day of the event.
At the gate. Yeah.
Okay, so we've done indoor ticket purchasing at the event. You might say, well, why are we doing a voucher versus a ticket sale? We have to be very mindful if we're offering tickets on a Monday. At any point in time, us or the opposing school, it takes one phone call of an active case to potentially disqualify a game. So, we're trying to not take that money because that becomes an auditing nightmare to try to get that money back to everyone. And so we're trying to have that process in place to allow for the sale the day of the event to guarantee that we get to have the event, if that makes sense. Student demographics, I tried to include a couple different snapshots for you to look at as it relates to enrollment. Somewhat self-explanatory there as far as the groupings. The next screen or frame allows for grade level enrollment, so you can see the actual individual enrollments per grade level on the following sheet. So that kind of gives us out of the gate number of children that we have in the school setting. This does include all on-site students as well as virtual students.
So our numbers are down.
Yes.
Have we identified, like, where, are we down mostly in elementary, or?
I don't know that we truly have, our elementary enrollment's the highest of the three buildings.
Is it? Okay.
So, but in that same context, when you look at grade levels, we really can't put a true finger on where it's happening. We feel as though it's dispersed K-12. We have had a lot of homeschool form requests based on either the experience with virtual school, the uncertainty of what's going to look like, and maybe we just take a semester as a family and try the homeschool and look to return in January. We've had a lot of those types of conversations at the building level. But to really pinpoint where we're at, we were in that 1350 to 1360 range last year, and we're down roughly 25 to 30 students from there. I think it's at, 1317, something along that line.
And that was down 20 or 30 from the year before?
Yes.
Okay.
Our peak enrollment, I remember at one point, was roughly 1,425 students. So since I've been here, we've maybe lost just short of 100 students, and it's really not school choice versus residential attendance. It's just a reduction in overall enrollment, just short of that amount. Any other questions regarding enrollment or demographics? Mr. Campbell, anything that you'd want to add as it pertains to either of those two?
Yeah, I do have the breakdown on the virtual and face-to-face, and we run K-12, 340 virtual students at this point in time as of today, and so that's 25.2% of our student population is virtual, and so 1,009 students are face-to-face students for the 74.8%.
Okay. And that is trending to be greater interest in on-site instruction?
Right, we're still seeing some movement in both directions. Probably we'll see more move back onto campus. We have elementary students doing their baseline testing at iStation this week, and so the virtual students are coming on campus, testing up in Safe Room B, and I think them and their parents seeing what school looks like. I think we'll see more of those folks move back in. We actually have 90 kindergarten through 4th grade students that are virtual today, and that's the lowest of the 3 buildings. The highest actually ended up at this point being the high school, and about half of the senior class is virtual.
Just as a general idea, how are our virtual students doing?
It's probably that typical bell curve,
Okay.
some A's and some F's, and lots of B's and C's and D's. And if anything, it's probably tilted, in some cases, down lower. Kids who wouldn't be doing anything if they were on campus, or doing less in a virtual setting. And so we, the high school administrators have searched out, spoken with, left messages if they couldn't get someone, with everyone who is having an issue on the grade side of things. I think all the buildings will be sending out letters inviting people to come back because of our academic concerns for them.
Yeah.
And you have to weigh that out against health concerns, and one's going to win out over the other, but there's some kids who are not doing what they need to do academically, and we need them back on campus.
Yeah.
And that means we'll have to rethink social distancing and where we see them and what it all
Right.
looks like, but we'll just have to do that.
I just wondered.
Yes.
So, thank you.
So what do we do when they fail the first semester? Or they keep staying home and they...
Well, if they fail, they'll have to repeat the grade. And if they're in a credit generating class, they won't get the credit.
Right.
If they need the credit to graduate, they'll have to retake the course. At the upper level, particularly 11th and 12th graders, they're really only taking courses that they have to graduate. The average senior is taking 6 courses instead of the 8 that he or she could be taking. And some of them are taking considerably less. They're taking just the exact credits they need to get to graduation. And some of the juniors are taking fewer courses as well, same sort of thing, not taking a full load because they got enough credits in line so that this year and next year they'll have enough to graduate. So I think if someone stays home and fails, that's it's a difficult thing, but it's a choice, because we will do whatever we can to make it work for them here or away, but they've got to work with us. And if they're choosing not to, then it's
Not
kind
much
of
you can
a
do.
hard place to be.
Well, I think,
we have a list of what Mr. Robertson called ghost students that we just aren't hearing from.
And that will result in us having to determine a degree of educational neglect depending on the grade level, and so it will formulate a plan to communicate with the appropriate people. I think the other thing that I would add is that connectivity is inherently a part of this process, because we do have some that are choosing virtual with no connectivity, and that's ultimately putting them in a position that they're not accessing content with the degree of frequency needed, they can't access resources, availability of lack of bandwidth. There's a whole array of things that goes with virtual learning that if you're not equipped with in the home, you're going to inherently struggle regardless of your academic ability.
You know, interestingly, as you say that, Doctor, on the list where Mr. Robertson talked to ghost students or their parents or guardians, connectivity hadn't come up as an issue on any one of them.
What are
It's
the
the-
parents saying? Like, what's
I
the
thought they were
response?
working, or yeah, we've kind of been laying off a little bit on that, you know.
Gotcha.
Bring it back to school.
Or
There's not any communication.
we'll be
Yeah.
seeing some of them back here.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I see it. Ones that are staying home probably will be here.
That's sad.
Do you want me to move on, Doctor?
Well, we're rolling right into you, so you've got to.
So I've shared with you what all the buildings are doing on their Wednesday early dismissals. Primarily, it's work to figure out what the school year is going to look like, making the efforts to communicate with their virtual students, looking at their data, working on their curriculum, getting that mapped out, planned out for the rest of the year. So shared that with you. I did want to let you know that we have begun interviewing. We advertised for another kindergarten teacher, and we didn't have applicants that we felt like we could bring forward. So we're able to meet standards by using a part-time paraprofessional in each of the classes where the numbers are kind of high, and so we'll be coming to you next month with a paraprofessional recommendation to add into the kindergarten. And then we're also now advertising as well. Dr. Murphy shared the slide about the substitutes, and we are having that issue with substitutes. So we're looking at hiring 3 additional paraprofessionals to be substitute teachers, and we feel real certain that we can use 3 today. We had 57 openings for 57 days that we needed substitutes in the elementary, and we had 7 substitutes provided. So we had 50 substitute days unfilled, so we feel like we can, what we're not paying to the service for substitutes will probably will save money with paraprofessionals compared to what we're not going to pay the service.
And
We'll
we
still
have
use the
some more
service.
available,
Yeah.
Yeah,
because right now we can't get the fill rates anywhere near an acceptable level. We're just, each day, this team is simulating a plan to fill vacancies. And anytime that we're quarantining employees, in many instances, that quarantine withstands for possibly 8 to 10 days of work. And so you have other related illnesses, other related needs for absence, and then you have the quarantine component coupled with that. It really does put a strain on our ability to put a qualified person in front of every one of our students on a daily basis. And so we're having to rethink that strategy, and we're still going to partner with Kelly Services, but we do feel like if we can hire 3 individuals, we would at least be able to cover in the areas where needed the most. So we're going to look at that as a strategy. The only other thing, Mr. Campbell, do you want to allude to the survey that we conducted, because we wanted to get some staff input prior to Labor Day, and so we did, if you want to kind of speak to that, that kind of helped guide some of the direction. We didn't link it in, but I think the board needs to be aware that we did conduct a teacher survey.
yeah, it was in last month's agenda, I believe, where we
I don't remember that.
don't remember that. Yeah, we did survey the staff right after school got started, before Labor Day, just trying to get some input from them.
Just see how it was going. because we just barely gotten started, and that was something that we kind of looked at in each building and tried to devise some areas of problem solving, just to kind of clean up any loose ends that the staff may have been perceived.
I had this question from another school district, teachers. For the principals, how many hours a day are your teachers putting in on working on virtual in class, virtual in class? What's the consensus, you think?
Besides a lot?
Huh?
Besides a lot.
How many hours you think a day they're working? To try to get all this stuff, the virtual done, the in-class stuff done, make sure the kids at home.
So as a point of clarity, I'll let them respond to it, but our strategy right now is K through 4, we have actually a virtual teacher.
Right.
Grades 5 through 12, because of a departmentalized schedule, every employee teacher that is teaching content is teaching on-site students and virtual students. So try to give an estimate that you think. The question would be, how far are teachers having to go well outside the school day? And it's going to be based on individual teachers.
No, I've just heard from
Just
different
provide a
school districts.
generalized response to that if you guys don't mind.
Sure. Well, my virtual teacher for grade level, spends their entire day teaching and or communicating with parents if they're not teaching. They do spend quite a bit of time outside of school, but I did remind them that they're committed during the day to being that communicator and that teacher, and then they also have families at home. And so when they leave school, if it's an emergency, of course, like any teacher would respond to the parent, but, they have all day during the
I
day.
just heard
so.
from different schools that some teachers are putting in 14, 16 hours a day.
I'd say some of the middle schools are going anywhere between 8 and 12. Because we've got kids at home. We may not want to get up and do the work at 8 to 10 in the morning. So all their questions come bombarding you between 4 and 7 o'clock at night. So these guys are sitting at home with their families trying to respond back and forth. We're trying to tell them on the front end.
That's my point with the whole thing of making them be accountable during the day. Because the teachers shouldn't be, when they go home, I work all the time. When I go home, I want to be home. I don't want to have to keep working. So I think we need to figure out how when they go home, they can spend time with their family and they can do what they need to do.
I've instructed my teachers, when they leave for the workday, put that cell phone up, don't answer texts, don't answer emails until they're back during the workday, because if a teacher responds to emails, phone calls, and texts up till 10 o'clock at night, it's gonna burn them out to where it affects their workmanship back when they come back to
They're
work.
not going to give 100% when they come back the next day. So that's why I think.
We had a lot of discussion around framing that on the front end, but inherently, you're gonna have some teachers that feel an obligation to try to support an individual, even though these statements may be made, there's gonna be some teachers still reaching out based on individual.
No, you've got some dedicated teachers that are going to work 16 hours a day because
Right.
little Johnny don't want to do his work till 8 o'clock at night.
And we have continued to share our concerns through the state association as well as the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education based on the term synchronous and asynchronous, and putting ourselves in a position to align virtual instruction with real-time instruction. And we're still at a point of parental choice over school oversight. So, we have not been given the latitude to truly intervene to that degree. If we continue to see an increase in the degree of student failure pertaining to virtual students, when we get to quarter, we may have to go against the grain and restructure what virtual is going to look like based on the outcomes that we're experiencing, because we deserve to provide a quality education to every student and not just let students fall through the cracks, knowing full well that we're not getting that level of engagement.
Yeah, and that's why I like what you told me the other day about December for another school district.
What?
About another school district at the end of the year.
Yeah, that's what I heard, and then when I talked to Dr. Murphy and Mr. Campbell, I I wasn't very accurate on that statement. The statement that I gave you.
Whether you're accurate or not, I like it.
I'm sorry.
Well, I would tell you in a general statement, there is a lot of different attempts to educate children going on throughout the state of Arkansas and across this nation based on trying to respect an individual family's health and well-being in the decision-making process and facilitate a learning model that we are dealing with K-12 children. And even though some students may perform very well at a AP level or collegiate level, when you are dealing with adolescent age that we're dealing with, virtual learning will not be a fit for some people choosing it. And we knew that going into this, and we're finding out very clearly. What I've guided this team to do is we're not going to wait till semester to modify and adjust. We're going to modify and adjust based on what we learn, what we observe, and what behaviors we're seeing, because if we wait till semester, we're going to have student failure behind us, and we want to minimize that if at all possible. Is that pretty much a fair statement?
Yes.
Is there anything you would want to add, Mr. Campbell,
No,
as far as the instructional format?
I know you asked about the survey, and one of the things we had feedback and middle school reworked how it's doing enrichment to free up the teachers to have more time to interact with virtual students and prepare for in-class students as well. The high school, we looking at some numbers and realized there was a spot where we could shift a class off of one teacher who was teaching 4 different classes onto another teacher who was teaching the same class all day long, and shift just a few kids, that move that one preparation off of the teacher with 4, get her down to 3, get the other one up to 2, balance it out. And that's stuff that happened midway. I mean, I think the middle school shift was right at Labor Day.
Mm-hmm.
The high school shift happened today. We're willing to make the changes. If a significant number of elementary students come back, we can't stuff them all in the classes that we have. At some point in time, it's going to be a breakover where the solely virtual elementary teacher probably have to teach face-to-face students. So we're going to see things ebb and flow and change all year long. I think Mr. J being able to give his teachers time during the day was significant to the spirit of the building. I think you really would be hearing an outpouring if all of the elementary teachers were trying to do virtual and face-to-face at the same time. High school, it's not easy, but it's more doable because you do have kids who are driven toward that graduation goal, and so they know they're working for credit, or not working for credit, but the credit is on the line. But I think as we go through this whole year, you'll hear us over and over again tell you, things have to be fluid. We have to be able to change. And even if we did away with virtual, if 6 teachers come down in quarantine in the high school, we have to close the whole place. Well, now everybody's virtual. So virtual's not going to go away this year, for sure.
I think everything, the points made, gives us a very thorough discussion of this topic. It kind of frames where we're at and how we're going to continue to support and react to the challenges we face. This is a situation in which typically a school year is designed based on policy. You run that school year, and then you make adjustments the next school year. We just have to understand that inherently what we're facing may require us to adjust throughout the year. And we intend to make those adjustments in the best interest of staff and students, because it is a balance. as we've heard the questions here tonight. So appreciate the dialogue. And if we have any other questions pertaining to instruction, Mr. Campbell in general? Okay, let's turn our attention then to Hayden Fusilier, Director of Support Services. Share with us what you have on the agenda for an update.
Just pull up here. So about 2 weeks before school started, my team and myself got a work order in. One of the top 4 middle school rooms had a dip in the flooring, and we did some investigative work. At that time, it was a very slight dip. We didn't think much of it. We looked into it, and then maybe 3 days later, it got pretty severe. As of right now, this is the bottom floor classroom. Mr. J, do you know what room number that is?
Not off the top of my head.
Next to one of our labs. And so you can see this is one of the trusses that has completely split. You want to keep on scrolling down.
It's on the 8th grade hall side down the hallway. So you're going out of the main office entry area towards the gymnasium down the hallway on the left.
This is also in the same room. This is some, what do we call these? Just truss hangers, not really a hanger, just a truss joint.
Impressive.
And this is separated along with 8 other trusses in that same room. And keep on scrolling. And there's another picture of one. So where we're at right now is we immediately got Napolts involved. We have the Napolts crew on site currently. They are making the repair right to B&F's recommendations. This is which is right here. So I can leave it right there, Mr. Campbell. So right now, what we're going to go and scroll back down. Keep on scrolling. Let's go to the picture. Make it a little bit easier. Keep on going. Keep going. That's the original truss design. I'm going to take you to the new truss design to show you what repairs are being made. Okay, right there is good. So we're going back with another engineered truss, but when we get them, these are coming from Pottsville, Arkansas. They should all arrive tomorrow. So pretty much the easiest way, I was told this, I'm not a structural engineer by any means, but what we're doing is sister studs, what these are called. So wherever we have a 2x4 for a truss, we're adding 2 on each side of it, and below and above. And we're also coming back with sheathing on each side, 3/4 inch sheathing. It is structural sheathing to hold that support. So they are actually replacing 8 trusses in that room. Again, I know Lloyd, you can speak to this too. We did a little walkthrough with Mr. Little last week or the week before, and you can make some comments too. But if you're walking into the upper floor classroom, about a 6-foot circumference area has dipped down about 1.25 inches. So a pretty significant dip. So the way that top floor looks, you have your VCT tile, you have some lightweight concrete beneath it, and then regular plywood. So the concrete itself has dipped down because the trusses have failed. Right when we were made aware of this, Dr. Murphy and I, we moved both of those classrooms out. Mr. J relocated those. So right now there are no students in both of those rooms, the top floor or bottom floor. So right there, Mr. Campbell's scrolling through the engineering diagrams that was given to Napolts. So these are exact engineered drawings they are building to as of right now. And once this meeting's over, I have created a Google Drive folder that we have all documentation in. I plan to share with you too, so we can all stay on the same pages. Like this right here, this is its description. They came on site, met with Tim, myself, and we did a walkthrough, what needs to be moved, repaired, things like that. As of right now, we're hoping Napolts is going to cover this cost. We haven't heard anything otherwise. The trusses and all the wood are being given to Napolts through CJ Horner at no cost. The only thing that we're not sure of is there going to be any labor cost behind this. As of right now, we do not know. Before the board meeting, I visited Dr. Murphy and I got a phone call from higher up at Napolts regarding what's payment look like, if any at all. I returned that phone call, left him a voicemail, so as of right now, I'm not sure. We'll definitely update you via email, or Dr. Murphy will.
So what payment?
If there is any at all.
So obviously, the original building plan was certified by engineers.
Right.
So do we just suspect that it was just a material failure? Like,
So what we expect is, right where, that's a good picture, Mr. Campbell, if you look in the room there in green, those two rooms side by side are the largest rooms that span east to west in that whole building.
okay,
Every other classroom has a 24 width. So, and they built the studs accordingly, or did I say studs, the trusses.
Right.
right?
One thing, and again, I'm not an engineer, coming from me, that's in that same room with a 28-foot span, they left the same truss design. So that's where I'm thinking where it's failing at,
Okay.
in my opinion. But we do have BNF, they're doing investigative work once they get this kind of completed. We found this out, knew the structural integrity of the building, we had Nat-Bolts jump on it pretty quick. So that investigative piece has yet to happen.
Okay.
But we are definitely moving forward on that pretty soon. Besides that other room, we have 3 other rooms that are nothing to that severe, but those truss joints or that metal clamps, they get pushed in, have also separated, not a crack, but they've also separated. So while they're here tomorrow morning, we're knocking out 3 classrooms and taking care of that as well. So no structural integrity of those rooms, it's just we're fixing it because we put an eyeball on it and saw that it's slightly separated, so those will be fixed.
Okay.
But
The
this
reason
is,
those separated.
So, just so you understand what the plan is, our plan is to work within the relationship of the recommendation of the engineers, but we're going to take our documentation, everything that we've gathered. I'm going to make sure that I work with our legal counsel to allow them to review it. Inherently, what we have is we have a building that was built that's roughly 10 years of age, and we have a concern with it. And so within the confines of that concern, we have to continue to try to move forward with what would be the most feasible recommendation, with an understanding that this is something that we'll probably have to monitor through the life cycle of the building. Because we've had this situation evolve, you cannot just assume because you make these repairs that you never pop a ceiling tile again until something else fails.
Right.
So we will have to, as part of this building review on an annual basis or potentially every 6 months, have to look at and evaluate how the trusses are holding up within the facility. This is a stick frame facility. From ground floor up through rafters. And so, you know, that's pretty much an overview of where we stand today. In my initial email, as soon as I was made aware of it, you could kind of feel my tone in the email based on the degree of concern held, because it truly is an element of what we would view as a structural deficiency in that given area. Is it confined to the 28-foot span versus a 24-foot span? Technically, no, because you saw some evidence of that in other areas of the facility. So, you know, I would say that, you know, we'll have to definitely monitor it, but also engage with a third-party review. Because Navaholtz is, they're holding firm with us because they were the general contractor or the construction manager, but they were not the designers of the building. They inherited a set of plans and they built the building based on the plans that they were given. So that's kind of where we stand at this point in time. I think the building, what, 10 years old?
10 years old, was built in 2010.
So it is, unfortunately, one of our newest facilities on the campus.
Well, keep us posted on that.
Like I said, I think we started a really good Google Drive folder, so all documentation is going to be held in there and they're shared to you.
Good, thank you.
Whatever it costs, they say, short term.
So moving on down, this launch year. We posted this, had Madison Burfine post this for us for our all staff and on Facebook and through share on our new website. So If you're not aware, back on the 3rd of this month, Arkansas Child Nutrition put out an announcement from, I believe, USDA. They extended the Seamless Summer Program through December, it's on there, December 31st, or until the funding has been exhausted. Again, so all students are able to eat breakfast and lunch free,
Which is wonderful.
which is wonderful, but we're still also encouraging everyone, make sure we still fill out our free and reduced lunch forms, those
Yes.
still matter. So we've pushed it out through social media twice now. But, so that was the communication that got pushed out about a week or so ago.
I saw that. That was good
Yeah,
news.
very excited about that.
Mhm.
Moving on down, this is, some road work that has gone on in the past month. This is behind our press box. Again, no side elevation has been changed. This is more or less just a cleanup, pushing dirt to the side, popping all the stumps out. And we've got us a really good, clean road bed. What you're seeing there, we're not going to add anything else to. This really creates us our road going from behind the agri shop or the OA Wind property area back to around where the water tower used to be and comes out next to the.
Is that right behind the press box?
It is.
Okay.
So Mike
That's
Seaton.
the water tower, isn't it?
Yeah, you're looking up.
Yeah, the water tower's right behind me. Was.
Oh, you're looking down.
We're looking down.
Okay.
We're looking towards the press box. So pretty exciting there. I don't have another picture with, I was gonna get the drone out, but didn't have enough time today. But, pretty exciting there. Looks pretty clean. Mike's done a very good job. This is Mike Seaton. Moving on down, I just plugged this in before the board meeting. You can have to zoom in just a little bit, Mr. Campbell. Nope. Back right there a little bit. I only plugged this in because I was talking about the water line relocation. And I put this line in here just so you can see it because it's labeled. So right here, if you look at this dashed line, this is a new water line that is now in place. If you remember, the original plans, part of the easement buyback, it had the water line shooting way up high on top of this hillside and then coming down. So our future plans are, we're still not for bid yet. That would be something we may talk about at our later board meeting. This site elevation would get dropped down to the agri parking lot. So in doing so, we wanted the water line relocated.
Correct.
So this is a new water line relocation that is now functional. So we are now running off the new water meter. It has benefited us. We've had multiple meters in the past. So now we have one spot. If we, I guess it's good and bad, one spot for, if we didn't do something at the same time, one shuts everything off.
Yeah.
But, so that's it. We know we had a few hiccups here and there just because of North Grand County Water's plans that were given to RDOT mismatched. And for an example, they thought they had all the facilities tied in. They forgot the gym. They forgot the safe room A just because it wasn't on the plans. So we've had some hiccups, but pretty smooth. It'll last a little bit longer than expected. And that's all I have. If you have any more questions, let me know.
Yeah, I got one.
Okay.
When are we fixing the, picking up K4 or whatever, and then having to drive all the way around Cobra Drive back to 5 and down and around back, like immediately? That's stupid.
So what's your scenario? How are you picking up and when?
Well,
Say that again.
so you have to pick up with Katie
In the
at
afternoon.
Or
2:45.
you can pick up middle school
can.
first and then pick up.
Right, that's what I was gonna suggest.
What time's middle school get out?
3:20.
3:20,
So, yeah.
So you pick up middle school,
and then come pick up yours.
Right.
'Cause they
That's
said
what all our middle school
3:30.
parents do. They come pick up their middle schooler first and then come.
That way you're not
And then
leaving
you
Just
exit
have
blocks.
to ride, stay on the campus, go past the auditorium, pick up your elementary kid and go home.
So what? They're picking up middle school first?
but they don't.
They get out.
can
What was the time?
2:45, but you don't have to.
2:45. Yeah, they just, we're all waiting until dismissal,
So
so
they
about
sit there
3:15,
till-
when you come get your middle schooler, then you just swing by and get the elementary, because we're still out there.
I mean, they're still just be sitting there.
Not necessarily outside. I mean,
Yeah,
it'd be
we
a
kind of
library.
saw it, yeah.
We
So
could
they-
leave the elementary there for,
Yeah, we have one wave that's picked up from about 2:40 to 3, and then another wave of all of our middle school parents come in about 3:15, 3:20, get their middle schooler and come and pick up. Works easier for them.
Probably what needs to be done.
Probably be the place.
Then you can exit out facing drive.
Because I've heard a lot of people are picking up and then driving all the way around.
I did that
Yeah.
2 or 3 times, and then I was like, this isn't
Most
working.
of them, yeah,
Oh,
That's
most of them I've
that's
taught
the
and
way-
told them if they have a middle
Yeah.
schooler,
Yeah.
the easiest way, they wanna do that, then they don't
Pick
have to
up.
come early. Yeah.
Pick up middle school.
At 3:20,
And they
then
can
swing
sit
by
there
to the
and play
elementary.
and talk or whatever they do anyway.
Because they come from inside the elementary, right?
Right.
They do.
Most of the time, yeah.
That
So
was
it's
an
they're
easy solve,
taken
wasn't it,
care
Cory?
of. Yep.
You should've
Disregard.
just called me.
Disregard.
Problem solved.
In the morning, though, I do drop Caleb off for football. So I take elementary side. By the way, that's cutting it short, that little sign that y'all put out there, which I love, but my gosh, there's, like, I've come close to hitting cars there. Anyways,
We don't teach drivers.
I drop Caleb off at football at the stairs.
Uh-huh.
And so he stops traffic and the people aren't happy, and so there we go. Trucking it down there, but yes, I did that once or twice, and then I thought, this isn't working, and 320 works really good.
But the traffic is moving. at the
Y'all know
time
me
that
too,
you're
late
dropping
afternoons. Do what, I'm sorry?
The traffic is moving at the time that you're dropping Caleb off. They're not sitting like they were sitting.
Yeah.
No, it's
down that street
moving.
over
Yeah.
there.
You don't
Yeah.
wait.
Except
No,
when she
no.
stops to
Don't
drop
wait.
him off and blocks traffic.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
even with that, they're still.
No, it's
so much
moving and it's
faster.
been very
fast.
efficient this
Super
year.
fast.
Yeah.
Yeah, super fast.
Good.
Or if
Very
you wait
efficient.
if you waited till 3:20, you could pick up your elementary kid first and then
Yeah, and you
circle
won't get
around
in
and
any
go
line.
right down behind the
You can
buses.
do it that way.
Those buses are
Yes.
going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just heard a lot of
they're-
people are driving all the way around and coming
I
back.
think people are worrying about the kid just sitting there being the last one, but it sounds
They're all
like that's
hanging out.
a bunch of
Yeah.
them.
I know the first week we had a lot of it, but we've stopped a lot between now and then.
Yeah.
I kind of told them
And
to.
it's
And now
taking time, getting used to
everybody-
procedure.
Watching, just heard that new tip, so.
No, it works really good.
That's a good
Hey,
idea.
whoever came up with that, that was really
How did
good.
we not?
There's no reason for anyone to really get here at 2:40 unless you just have a kindergartner or first grader that doesn't have any other siblings, really.
Yeah.
Unless you just want to pick them up, like right when school's out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or
Just so you
repeat
talk
that
about
louder.
it.
We're getting a really long line that
Can I
exists
write
at
down
that
some
time.
names?
But even now, I'm
Call your
watching
friends, Cory.
I thought I got them all.
You missed a couple.
You missed.
You missed Cory.
First and second year.
There have been a couple of instances where like the high school line, like picking up in the afternoon, somebody will park, like, right there where, you know what I'm talking about? And
Instead of
they,
pulling
one day,
out.
I'm not kidding y'all, I sat there for 15 minutes and nobody was moving and I thought, why is there nobody behind me? Because I guess I just came at a good time and nobody was behind me, so there was like 3 cars stuck there for 15 minutes because there was a truck parked.
Oh.
They just shut it off and got out.
Yeah, finally, somebody was smart enough to go around them and there we went, but anyways. Wait, I couldn't be the first one, that was too far back. Anyways, it works really good. Corey.
Thank you. Good update there.
As I said something, Ms. Craver, I said this.
Oh, I heard about it. She was following my rules, our rules.
Yes.
Any other questions or comments before we move into new business item?
All right, so, new business, let's see. So we have a motion, oh, that's you. Matt.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
He's still thinking about the drop-off and pickup situation.
Motion to pass the annual financial report for the 2019-2020 and budget for 2020-2021.
Several things under that bullet there.
Well, I would first turn your attention to some of the I-related documents there below the budget document. I'd kind of like to review those first. Just the first one kind of gives you a snapshot of the historical fund balances of each fund. We technically always zero out Fund 1, and then everything moves to the operating fund, and then you make a transfer to manage the overall balance between the operating fund and the building fund as you prepare to open. So you can see the majority of the money is contained within Fund 2 and Fund 3. And what you're looking at is the fiscal year number. So the fiscal year number we're entering currently is FY21. So what you're seeing there is the close of 20, the close of 19, the close of 18, the close of 17. We're entering fiscal year 21, and this is kind of just a historical snapshot of the years going back 4 years. I pulled this data. I've gotten into a partnership with APSRC, and they have a really good reporting tool that does some really good financial reporting separate from the old Cognos reporting for some of you that have been on the board a while. So this is a tool that provides a pretty clean look at the financial picture. I would draw your attention to a couple of things as it relates to Fund 6 and Fund 8. Fund 6, really the balances there have began to really grow with a attention to detail around Medicaid RMAC funding. And so we've been able to draw in revenue that historically maybe we weren't capitalizing all of it. So that's been a reflection of, because this year is really, Mr. Campbell and I were talking this afternoon, the first year that we've actually gotten a significant improvement in federal money in the last 3 or 4 years. We've either been flat or slightly declining. And so the majority of that revenue increase is centered around RMAC and Medicaid. And that's that billing process that Mrs. Mushrush takes on with her work as special education director. Our allotment to provide Tanya James is a half-time person working directly with her, and Tanya's chasing a lot of those numbers for us. So getting some secretarial help there associated with Mrs. Mushrush has really allowed us to capitalize on some revenue.
And that money's earmarked for?
Health specific related activities. There's a definition. We call it restricted, but it's relatively broad.
Okay.
It could include transportation.
Our clinic that we're working on?
We could infuse some of that towards mental health.
Okay.
You know, the grant that we have currently has set aside allowances exceeding $50,000, so we will take our construction money for the upgrades to the modulars and apply that for reimbursement. So that grant that we're speaking of is $500,000 over 5 years, separate from these funds allocated in Fund 6. You could treat in your world special childhood reimbursement. You spend the money first, you show them the receipts, and they reimburse.
They're not going to want us to grow that fund beyond a certain amount.
Correct.
There's going to be a threshold that we have to get to, and when we get there, we've got to start expending that money.
Well, we're trying to create some specific strategies for those restricted expenditures.
Okay.
Yes. And you have, you know, you purchased a special ed bus out of one of those, your short bus come out of that, but we've got to continue to work with Miss Tanya and make sure that we're coding to take qualifying expenditures and spend that money down.
Okay. That's all. That was my only concern. Thank you.
And then the other area that I draw your attention to is you can kind of see where our food service balances were at, and then we are entering into our partnership with Chartwell's going into year 3, and so you can see that we've actually contracted food service and increased our balances simultaneously.
I think that is an awesome partnership.
So we've been able to do a couple of things there. I think increased food quality, breakfast in the classroom is a game changer in terms of revenue. So the more meals that we can provide, the more children we feed, and the more opportunities we have for reimbursable meals. So that's a pretty good snapshot of the cash position of the district. Go to the next slide, if you would, please. Another, and I kind of designed this kind of based off of some questions that I've gotten here and there through the past year and a half. And so this next slide gives you a snapshot historically of how is your budget designed, and is your budget built on things or people? People are reoccurring expenses. things are one-time expenditures, whether that is a purchase service, whether that is a purchase of land, whatever that may be. But you can see on the right-hand side, when you look at salary and benefits, we've typically run between 65% to 60% of the budgetary allocation is based in the design and expenditures of people, and then the remaining amount would be for all other related services. So that just gives you, as the whole thing sets up and you approve it, that's the ratio of your expenditure to people versus your expenditure to other related resources and programs. Any questions there? Next slide. This next one kind of takes and gives us a snapshot of what our people do. And so what you're looking at there, I've had Mr. Campbell work with the principals, kind of continue to, this is where some of this course modification took place, is based on how many students are enrolled in each class. These are high school schedules, alphabetized, or no, they're subject grouped, aren't they? Based on English, it looks like science, math. Then we kind of move into resource, social studies, and then other related activities, electives. So you see the high school staff, and then you see the middle school staff. A couple of other things that we accomplished in the last year is we now have a consistent schedule from grade 5 through grade 12. And that kind of positions us long-term that if we need to share staff from building to building based on a certification, based on a section, we would be able to do that long-term. A couple of things that kind of were modified is we used to open with an advisory in the middle schools. You can see we've kind of shifted that advisory into what's called period 3. And we open and close the day with an athletic period and have a 7th grade athletic period kind of midday in that regard. Every time I put this mask on and wear it for over an hour, I applaud our teachers, because it's exactly what our teachers contend with on a daily basis.
Yes.
So when you look at elementary, you can kind of see the staffing model associated with them as well. I know this was in here, but did anyone have a specific question centered around this?
I just have as it's laid out here, a question. So if the time slot is blank, like there's nothing in the time slot, does that mean that they're continuing on with what was in the previous slot, or is it just that they're
If it's
not
blank,
assigned?
they may not be assigned students, or it could be a double block period. Can you give me an example?
Russell.
I was looking.
Russell special ed. So
Line item
she has
50,
kids
line
assigned.
item 50.
Line item 50, Mr. Campbell.
Line item 50.
Please.
Okay,
Yeah,
police.
that's a
He's
good
elementary.
example.
So, police,
All morning.
those are the
Yeah.
2 periods he's assigned to the middle school. The rest of the day, he's assigned to to the elementary. And so the elementary schedule doesn't match up the same sort of time block
Okay.
period.
So
So
maybe
should
an
have
overlap.
that down there, but I don't know.
Okay.
Because he,
I
you
just-
shared him.
That was just kind of a generic
Right.
question. I know I wasn't.
I probably could
Picking
go in
on
there and
anybody.
just black out those boxes, but I was trying to match up what they actually do
Do.
during the day.
Yeah.
So you could see that, and
Well, like-
some of those just don't match up.
Like line 47 is web, and there was
Yes.
nothing on there all
So she's the
day.
counselor, and
until
she's
the end of the
assigned
day.
one class at the
Yeah.
end of the day, where
But-
she meets kids every day.
The rest of the day,
The rest of the
she's
day,
just
she's the
counseling.
Yes.
Good questions. Any other questions specific to this document? I know it's the first time you've really had a chance to see something at this level. Our building principals we're using it as a tool for designing staff efficiency through time, but Didn't know if you'd have any questions this evening, and since we had built it for that, I just wanted to share it because there have been some conversations I'd had with board members based on what teachers teach, and I think this kind of
No, it lays it out.
lays it out there in one document where you can see the whole thing. is what I
The
was
numbers
seeking.
at the end of each block are the number of students that were enrolled with that specific teacher on that day,
Okay.
by that date, yeah.
Because that will change.
It does, it's changed since that day. So if they have a 0 at the end of a title, that means that the students in that period are not assigned to them.
Any other clarity you'd want to give on that, Steve, that
No,
you can
sir.
think of? All right, appreciate you putting that together and working with the principals on that. And then the final document I have there is it is a part of our requirement to place on the website, but I wanted you to be able to see all the, the decisions that you've rendered. This shows you the actual reflection of salaries allocated to each employee within the district. And so the total salaries are in the column. You might see some stipends on the right-hand side, but those stipends are included in that salary.
I was gonna ask that they are included
Yes.
already.
Mhm. And this is kind of the Cognos printout
Right.
that, and the only thing that I couldn't get Tanya to get out of it, you will see some duplication of names. It's not a duplication of salary, it's due to advanced degrees. So it pulls it for varied levels of degrees and may duplicate some individuals in there in that regard. So those are 4 documents that, at times, invariably, as a board member, you're asked different types of questions from community members. And that kind of and if you can't remember the specifics, you can always guide them to a building principal or guide them to us. But I think kind of the first 2 documents specifically are important to the Board of Education. And that is, what's the current cash position? And what's your allocation of staff to other related expenditures? And I think that's something that every board member should know and be able to kind of speak to, because that kind of prioritizes where we spend our money. The next item that we have is the budget itself. Working with Tanya, she's truly grown in her role of doing this work, and we're continuing some coding to make sure we're in full compliance based on the auditor. And so did some additional work even today in cleaning up the budget and the actuals. And we had this in a PDF, but I linked it back in so we can kind of do a narrative and a little bit of an exercise to show you how the budget will react to Fund 3 expenditure commitments. And so what I want to kind of walk through first is you have 3 columns, of course. You have the budget from 1920 and what was actually taken in. So if we look at our revenues in the yellow line, what we budgeted, we actually took in just slightly less over what we budgeted. So we 13.5, we took in 13.477. We're projecting based on the student account, more so on the increase in assessed valuation. Our assessment went from roughly 386 million assessed valuation to almost it's 397 and some change. So we have had an increase in the assessment, which is going to increase the overall amount of money that we can bring into the district within the projection. If our relationship of the uniform rate guarantee, if we don't collect a total of 98% of that assessment, say that you have delinquencies, you have people not paying, and you come in at a 95% collection rate, the state will pay the difference between 95% and 98%. They won't pay anything over 98%. Yeah, that's nice. That's new to you.
That's sweet. Yeah.
So you're guaranteed at least 98%. The collection beyond the 98%, if you do have a tax-paying base that exceeds 98%, you get to collect that relationship also, but sometimes you have taxes being paid in arrears, sometimes you have taxes never paid, but that kind of gives you a running total. So as an actual, we fell just short of the 98% threshold, but far exceeded 97% because we only had a payment of $66,000 to offset the 9.7 million that was collected. So we're trying to frame out an increase in revenue of approximately less than $400,000, but this is the lion's share of our revenue right here in the yellow.
Now, if I understand correctly, this guarantee from the state up to the 98% is only on the 25 meals, not on anything above
That is
the
correct.
25 meals.
Correct.
That is correct.
Okay.
And you can see local funds above the 25 mils will be based solely off of the collection rate. So if you come in at 97% collection rate on the mills in excess of 25, which in our instance is 7.4 mils, because exceeding that amount in terms of our total, 9.4 mils, because we have two mils in the operating fund, 7 mils in the debt service fund, a little over 9 mils total would be calculated at that percentage of rate of payment.
So for budgetary purposes, then we're always going to budget a 98% collection rate, not a 100% collection rate.
Yes, well, first thing we always look at is historical collections.
Right.
So we look at our past 3 years of historical collections where they have run. This is actually the first year that I've been here that I can recall getting some URT guarantee because we're typically above a 98% collection rate.
I thought we were. I thought we were.
So,
I was surprised.
yes,
to
we're
see
very
that we had
surprised and
some.
we're thinking that we could receive, and here's how that will work. That 95,000 that I'm budgeting will come into play if we're slightly below, and if we're well above that 9.89, we will get money well above. So we do believe between just how we're budgeting, we should obtain the recommended 13.8 million plus.
I see. I would concur.
But it'll be determined, yet to be seen, whether we're going to exceed 98% or not.
Right.
Historically, we have. So that's the biggest chunk of the revenue. The carryover that we see in the operating fund out here at 2 million is basically moving the cash position forward with all of the varied state level carryovers. So you can see some of the restricted, now we're looking at the green. And so as you look down to the green, you can kind of see that the overall carryover on the right-hand side is 2.3 million. So all of those individual funds associated with the general operating fund get you to 2.3 million. You might say, well, I thought there was 2.9 million on the table. I'm going to show you the variation here in just a second. But before we go any further, you can kind of see what we actually collected in those two categories versus what was taken in. And you can see what we budgeted. We actually collected more state than what we budgeted. So we were up in that area from 992 to 1.1 million. We've allocated roughly a little over $1 million in that regard moving forward. And that's, I would say, probably a relatively conservative measurement based on what we took in the prior year. You can kind of see where the debt service fund is at. That's just interest-related activity in that regard. That is identified as revenue. That's the yellow line. I mentioned that the 2.3 that you see, I don't know if you can see all of it, Mr. Campbell, kind of scroll back just right there. You can see the 2.3 setting out there as a carryover. The reason that it's 2.3 is I mentioned that $567,000 that I went ahead and shored up the building fund with. That was the transfer. If you remember at the beginning of the meeting, I showed you year to date. We had a transfer of $567,000. That helped bring the building fund back up. If you recall, we had a relatively aggressive degree of expenditures with land purchase, other related activities. If you look at actuals down under expenditures, your building fund spent roughly $1 million last year total. So with that, we're replenishing it with $567,000. That then takes your 1.3 up to 1.9. Okay, and what I put there is I put year-to-date expenditures in 2021. Our roofing project for the high school did not get an invoice prior to June 30, and so we had to pay that bill in July, so that pulled off our building fund roughly $110,000. We spent $19,000. You saw the picture of the excavation. That excavation cleared almost 3 acres. And we spent $19,000 that come out of there. We did a $10,000. There was about 3 expenditures that could have been taken out of the operating fund. They were coded here, and I'm leaving them here if the board's okay with it, versus having to transfer it back into the operating fund and then spend again, because every time we conduct a transfer, we have to write an explanation of the transfer. So that's kind of the position that brings us to roughly tonight. There's about $1.7 million in the building fund, and there's about $2.3 million in the overall operating fund. So that's kind of the cash position outside of the budget design. So I'll kind of stop there and see if I can go back and explain that again if needed. Do you see how we increase the building fund based on the transfer? Okay.
And that $110,000 we spent on the roof in the high school out of this fiscal year versus last fiscal year was already in last fiscal year's budget.
It was technically slated to be spent out of the building fund.
Right.
We didn't know whether we would get it done in time to pull it off. It would have reduced the balance further in the last year. We didn't get the invoice in time to pay it, so it come off this year.
Right. What my point is.
Either way, it's coming out Fund 3.
It's coming out Fund 3 either way, whether
Yes.
it was before
Yes, sir.
July 1 or after July.
Right.
So that was what I was trying to get to in my Missouri way.
It's very good.
There you go.
Missouri.
You heard it here.
So the federal fund is in pink.
No, just saying.
In this fund color, the only thing I kind of put out there, I try to put a few notes here and there to kind of frame what we were doing. One-time funding in the CARES Act is roughly allocated at $154,000. That could go up to the full $168,000. That's the true allocation. We've listed based on, I think, potentially what we have already allocated in terms of expenditures. Because that's pass-through money, you're going to have to spend it in order to receive it. You've got some carryover there. That kind of gives you that explanation of where your carryover lies within the funds of Fund 6, and you can kind of see your historical tracking of where some of that money resides. Medicaid and RMAC is where the lion's share of it is, outside of pretty small increments. So, you know, one of the things that we could do is we could target those restricted funds, you know, even to the degree that if we could promote health and wellness with a walking track, we could possibly purchase a track out of the RMAC funds. That may not be the truest discretionary measure of those funds, but you know, I'm going to look at a full definition of those two funds because they are restricted. And it'll either be that you are utilizing, what I would share with you is sometimes you utilize a restricted fund and then you supplement your operating balance with the remaining amount. It's not truly extra money. It's just targeting restricted funds as a part of the expenditure allocation. So if you call it truly extra money, then it's going to increase the amount of deficit that you have within the budget.
I have one question on that, on the CARES Act funding. Have we really not spent all of that money yet?
You want to try to respond to that, Mr. Campbell?
It looks like we
or-
only spent
or not?
21,000.
We have
I
168.
get most of that.
I think we have, I just don't know that it's all been coded.
Okay,
All of it, but yeah, probably about 40,000 short. Just because originally when we budgeted for the CARES Act, we did multiple purchases. You know, y'all approved some of them for the iPads being one,
Yeah.
Chromebooks.
That's
not
why I'm wondering
Chromebooks,
why
but-
it
But the
wasn't
Chromebooks have
actual-
not been
They
invoiced
haven't
yet,
been
because
invoiced
they've
yet.
never arrived.
Correct,
That's
not
part
till
of our
December.
issue, is we've ordered stuff and we still don't have it.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
then the third being is on the AT&T hotspots. We budgeted one figure for the monthly reoccurrency per hotspot.
Uh-huh.
And that price dropped down to funding that was state funding across the board for everybody. So
Okay,
that pricing dropped, I think 15, I won't know, John's in there, about $10 a hotspot.
We
Okay.
will
So we
intentionally
saved
spend
about
every
40 grand
dollar.
there.
okay.
So originally,
It'll
We're
be
picking,
spent.
we're picking up paying some of that resort TV.
I just
for this.
thought we had
There's a
kind of allocated, and was wondering why
plethora
the
of things we
Right.
spend it on.
last year's total was only
Well,
21,000, but that
yeah.
makes sense if the Chromebooks had not arrived.
But they're probably encumbered in there already.
they should be, yeah.
They should be, but I don't know specifically how to react to knowing the allocation total was 168 and we've got 154 on the table listed as revenue. And I don't know if that's an error or whether that is she's pulled a number based on what's encumbered and spent and not coded, so.
Yeah, so this is coming from a fund statement from the State Department. So that's, I mean, that's. where
She's
that
pulling it
number-
straight from the state,
Yeah.
so.
It's saying that we have 154,000 left
No, it's
No.
saying we have 154,000 available.
out of the original 176.
That was, go way back up here, and that column is 1920.
Right?
She's saying in 2021, the amount we'll have is another,
Oh, they're planning on a second
yes.
CARES Act.
yes.
Okay,
See, we're at the
Well,
176
no,
budgeted, but there was only 21,000 that was actually expended. So
If
the
you
21,000 expended in the 154, you
Add
got
up to the
154 left on the
176.
table
yes.
based on the 176 that was received, so your allocation is 154 because it's been 21 the prior year.
And did they actually give you the whole 176, or did they say spend it first and apply for
No,
reimbursement?
you gotta show the invoice, you gotta show
Okay.
how you spent it, then they either qualify it as an expenditure or not.
So we probably only maybe received through July a reimbursement of
That's
21,502.
probably what it is. 'Cause We're
Okay.
coding everything.
So
codes.
we will expect to receive the
Yes.
other 154,000?
Correct.
Okay,
But
Got it.
that's the only line on this page that, on that pink, that is that way.
okay.
Right, it's actually not budgeted.
Right.
We didn't actually budget 176,000 in 1920 because we didn't know the carry.
Right.
And I do want to back up and give credit where credit is due, because I've been harping for my last 8 years of the superintendency on declining elements of federal revenue, and we have fallen into a different degree of poverty that has accelerated, and it's really not that the federal government's putting new money, but that our degree of poverty has shifted that put us in a different category as far as federal funds received. So you can take that for, you know, the difficulty in educating poverty, but our allocation that we received, as you can see on line 53, was 221 actual, and we are projected to receive 420,000 in Title I. So we'll have to devise a plan.
That's not based on our free and reduced. That's based
Yeah,
on-
explain that.
That's based on the percentage of students, or percentage of children 5 through 17 living in below the poverty level, at or below the poverty level, for last year.
Yes.
Or the year before.
Okay.
It's the percentage that they use to determine, and that percentage in our community shifted by, I think it was, what did I say, 18 to 26?
Yes.
So
18 to 26% of the population
In 1
is
year.
defined and below the poverty line.
it shifted.
Wow.
So
And
we
so that's
have
why
a
we-
segment now, a quarter of our population below the poverty line, and that's why that funding increased, but that inherently creates its own educational challenges that may far exceed the funding allotment.
Absolutely.
But I think it's important for you guys to know the challenges we face in terms of educating the true population that we serve. And I think inherently, that is descriptive of part of your instructional conversations and the challenges related to on-site and virtual students.
And so what I was saying earlier, so that carryover on line 53 is the remainder of the 221,592.
Out of the
Okay.
229.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's just,
No.
so the 229 would have been the previous year's allotment and carryover from the year before that,
Okay.
and then what we received, and then they tell us what our carryover is.
Okay.
That has to
They
be
have a
spent.
maximum percentage that you can carry over.
Right, right. So that's different from that CARES Act out there,
Yeah.
where you're subtracting that middle.
Mhm.
So we've covered some pretty good ground, great conversation on federal revenue. Is there any other related questions on federal revenue? From there, you kind of move to food service in terms of the projected area of revenue generated in food service, and we do feel like that we're picking up a half of year, so that's going to make sure that we get all those reimbursements available, so it should help us a little bit in revenue projection for the full year. So that kind of frames out revenue. You can see the actual budget versus the actual revenue taken in, and so we budgeted 16.5. We ended up taking in roughly 16.2 within all funds. So we had a slight shortfall in the overall revenue that we achieved in the prior year, which kind of led with our spending plan to a reduction in the overall cash position year over year. The only thing I would tell you, and I've always guided boards, you don't want to deficit spend on a continuum, but you can spend down balances outside the boundary of your operating fund. So if you are intentionally spending down balances, the state doesn't come knocking on your door, but if you repetitively gave raises and spent money out of the operating fund where funds 1, 2, and 4, excluding fund 3, but funds 1, 2, and 4 could never cash flow to a surplus, then that's when your audit will not be clean, and they'll be asking a lot of questions, and you'd have to really explain why your financial position was decreasing. Some of our positioning has been centered around specific projects and intentional spending approved through the board. We kind of turn our attention now to the expenditure side. You can see in the teacher salary fund, 6.2 versus 6 million in terms of the actual expenditure. If you recall, we had 2 or 3 employees, definitely 2 that I can recall, possibly a third, that we had in the budget that left the day the purple and gray game, if that rings a bell.
Purple and gold game.
Purple and gold game in that regard, but that kind of
It was a great moment.
yes, that's what I was thinking. But in doing so, that reduced our overall expenses because that salary obligation we had was not there. There's a couple other things. There was one other thing we thought of. Do you remember the third, Mr. Campbell? Wasn't there another teacher or not? Or was it only the 2?
Let's do this.
It was
2.
No, there were 3.
I thought there was a third
Position.
math position we didn't fill that was in the budget.
Yes.
Because we had the late resignation, was unable to fill it. So it was actually a part of the budget that went unfilled. So that was, when you're on average budgeting a 60 to 65,000 salary benefit situation, you're going to inherently, that's a large portion of that difference. Now, when you move to 2021, you have step movement, a $500 increase to the base, and the extra PD days are all built into that 6.2 million. She also alluded to step movement, restructuring classified salary schedules. in the area from the 1.5 to the 1.7. Down here with equipment, we have at least allocated for 2 buses to be purchased out of operating. Could be a bus and a van, depending on the position, direction that we want to take. We could leave a portion of this in operating, go back up there and possibly, depending on qualifications, if one of these was a special needs bus, we might be able to go that route out of restricted funds, or we could buy a 3rd bus. We're getting back in a much better position with the transportation fleet, but we still hold true to staying the course with either 2 buses or a bus. You know, we had talked about maybe the cargo van approach. We're still doing some research to make sure a non-CDL driver could drive that van to allow us to do some of those short trips without having to hire a driver. So your debt service fund is seeing a pretty significant reduction year over year. Your Fund 3, you can see how much we expended in Fund 3. What I have done here is I put these projects on the side. What I intend to do is we're going to talk about the projects. We don't have to react to all of them this evening. I want to get some input from the board, but I also want to go through an impact just in the budget design based on the decision. So I want to just kind of, if you don't mind, for right now, we're going to come back to Fund 3, but we're going to look at Fund 6 and Fund 8, and then look at kind of where the budget stands, revenue versus expenditure, and then come back to Fund 3. So federal, you can kind of see the framing of that. It is increased in terms of salaries, as well as the overall amount of allotment, and part of that is in alignment with money. When you say, Mr. Campbell?
Yes, you have to budget what you're allotted. So
Correct.
when we have that $200,000 increase in Title I, we've got a budget to spend it.
The overall food service fund, we're trying to keep it just setting it up slightly below what we're going to take in. So revenue and expense, we're pretty much at a wash. And here again, that's in the confines of the budget design. When you think about how the prior year budget reacted to $1 million being spent out of the building fund, you know, that budget was designed to deficit spend 736. It ended up deficit spending 644, so you can see kind of the availability, the difference. And so that's some of the cleanup that took place today as it relates to actuals, and that made more sense in terms of where our fund balances were landing. So what I want to kind of discuss is right now the budget's neutral. If we wanted to do some projects to draw the building fund back down closer to $1 million versus $1.75 million, my comfort level with your building fund would not be to take your building fund much below $1 million to kind of contend with any unforeseen, unrelated issue. You know, we kind of discussed the topic tonight that could have some unforeseen future conditions that we might want to use within the confines of the building fund. If you were to approve a millage and you had a significant change order on a $20 million project, you may need $600,000 just to cover a change order. A building fund can be held as a reserve and could be transferred back to the operating fund if needed. You do not have to exceed or expend any value in the building fund. It is really solely up to the autonomy of the list that we create objectively as a board and a governance structure. What are we trying to accomplish, and setting ourselves in a position to accomplish the necessary tasks academically and with specific projects. So, you know, if we were to choose the K1 awning and the excavating project, that would be $385,000 that we would place within the budget. And if we did that $385,000 would then change, and it should react to Mr. Campbell, going down Mr. Campbell. We would have roughly a $365,000 deficit, so our cash position would change by roughly $365,000 when you look at the fund balances that we hold as a school district that you saw historically. That's if we did 2 projects. And invariably, it's, you know, any additional projects that you add to that could be expended out of the building fund. It really, what I always guide boards to is what do you want to target as your fund balance for the building fund? And if you want to keep all your money in the operating fund, you can keep up to $2.7 million there, but that's the cap. By law, you can't go above that. You're going to have to transfer any excess to the building fund. So, you know, we're at, if you go back to the top of the page, Mr. Campbell, we're at with the building fund. When I transferred the 567, it got you to, you go to line 47.
1.9.
You were at 1.9 year to date. We're at 1.742.
You say we don't want to get below 1?
I would be cautious to go below 1 million. And here again, depending on how revenue comes in within the, here again, we're designing a budget that's going to create actuals, and so, you know, depending upon whether we give a bonus or we don't give a bonus, there's not a bonus within this budget. Bonus is going to be $200,000, so.
That's not out of the 1.7.
No, but technically it'd come off of the operating fund. It would not be budgeted, so it would
Right.
strain the operating fund to a slightly different degree of reduction. What I would guide you to is remember, go to the bottom line. I always kind of keep bottom line cash position. I think that works best for all of us, knowing that we inherently want to have a strong position on the operating fund and a reflective position on the building fund that accomplishes our needs and priorities of the district. And so what I've done, as you've seen, is those major projects listed are all things we've discussed in the past and are all things that could be accomplished in this next fiscal year if we chose to do all of them, or we could choose to do a part of them. Tonight, my intentionality would be to approve the budget, and then we come back in October, have the necessary discussion, possibly position Mr. Fusilier to at least make sure that we have bid, if we get our roadway widening approved with MoDOT or RDOT, we go ahead and find out whether it's going to be 325, whether it's going to come in at 280, or whether it's going to be 400. And if it comes in at 450, we may have to reevaluate that, but if it comes in at 275, it's definitely a project that fits into the framework of our master plan. And even at 325, I do believe allowing our parents, because what would happen is right now when you pull in to go around here in this line, you're describing the turn, you would be pulling in at the OA Win entrance and coming through and stacking and coming by the ag building in a straight line, and that's how you would enter into the campus for both elementary and car rider. And then that road that you saw up there with some conditional improvements could actually be a roadway that could guide elementary traffic around and come down from the handicap parking and pick up in the elementary area. And, you know, long-term planning is our elementary traffic does not go behind the auditorium.
So you want to approve the budget as it's described tonight, not with that 385 in there, or with it?
Or if the board so wishes, you could approve a value up to $400,000, and we try to bring you a list of projects to that level. Or we can approve it at 0 out of the building fund at this point, and then we can make an approval next month based on the projects that you want to proceed with.
That's what I.
After you've had a chance to talk about
At
it.
0.
That we leave it at 0
Mhm.
as you presented it originally, and then get with, you know, Hayden for October to really discuss the capital projects.
Out of curiosity, the K1 awning, I know we talked about that,
It's on the list, as you
No, no, we
noticed.
Talked about it?
but was it 60? That was
Well-
just the front and sitting down the side?
Well, no, it was not 6, that will not be. Now, what you've done at this point, you brought out Hot Springs awning. Do you have anything that you can update them with in terms of a number?
I mean, you have to give me a number, you can just say, no, it's more than 60.
Oh, no, that's a budgetary number. They were actually the walkthrough today. I said, just give me a ballpark number. And he says, for everything, looking at between 48 to 50.
Okay.
See, cause I'm looking at those
But-
projects.
And is that
What the
coming-
biggest thing you've got to remember is we're dealing with asphalt right now, and to truly deal with what we're doing with that water, that would still go, if we pull that sidewalk out, redo that, we're gonna have water going back into Katie's office again. So a lot of that's gonna be
They've made
about 15,000, about 15,000 worth of concrete.
Marshes.
So take that 15,000 out of 48,000, so it's
My
you're at a
question-
$30,000 on it.
As a point of clarity, are you just talking about the front and attaching back to the old entrance? You're not talking about going down Face and Drive?
Not facing drive.
Yes,
No.
so Face and Drive is
Yeah, I was
always
just
been
wondering,
a
look at,
different
because
number.
I just sit there and look at it and, I mean, I wanna do the awning, I wanna do the parking lot, and I wanna do the bleachers. The track can wait, retaining wall seems like 40,000 is expensive.
Now, one-
The
Well, that's
retaining wall.
why in
One-
October, we should really discuss these.
No, I know,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
And, you know,
saying.
yeah. it's
One thing I will
more
add-
Specifics.
One thing I will add, all these numbers on here, from about 2 board meetings ago, y'all were talking about how y'all wanted everything wrapped into one.
Yeah.
So instead of me subbing everything out in different numbers, that retaining wall, that's everything. So that's,
And-
come tomorrow,
Turnkey.
that's everything is turnkey.
So I'm just saying.
So that's a top dollar number.
Right, that's,
I mean, I
Could
was
be
looking
done
at it
cheaper.
and
that's
thinking,
right, it could be done cheaper.
Well, and when we get to the specific projects, you will have specific
You know
bids
Right,
for the different components that make that up.
yes.
Okay, so that's an October project.
You in?
Let's leave it at
Let's do
0.
You want to turn that back to 0, Doctor?
Let's turn that to 0.
the track's fine.
Well,
I'm saying-
One, couple of questions here. One, in October, we'll know more about our trust situation at the middle school.
We will.
Right.
2, we got the track on there, but I don't know that we're going into weather that we can redo that track.
It'd be next summer.
It'd be next summer if we get
Right.
it done then. So this could end up to be a next year project, the year after.
Right.
Because in all honesty, they started on June or July, they don't
Right.
finish it, we're gonna pay it after June 30th.
But regardless of payment, the
We can
commitment
encumber
to
it.
the track has to be done 7 to 9 months in advance to get it on a schedule, to get it done in June,
Yeah.
so that we're not messing with it in
I
September.
agree, I'm just saying, but there's a very short window to do the track.
Yes, there is.
And
Yeah.
It's either gonna be done in June or July.
And
And if we don't have our position and give our personnel time to get it scheduled and structured, we won't like the end result when we're trying to do a track during this preseason game or.
Right,
first
I
week of
understand, that's
season.
why I'm saying we got such a short window to do that.
Right.
I don't know if that's time to talk about the track, but my biggest concern at this point is if there's any hidden costs in that middle school with those trusts. Because, yeah, it should be someone else's responsibility. I don't think the design was real great in the first place.
No, it should never been built.
Built out of wood, but, there's a lot of weight there and concrete, but anyway, that's a personal opinion.
Well, and that's,
That's the issue we're living with. There's nothing we can do about that
Correct.
issue.
Correct.
we gotta
just
keep
have-
that issue covered.
We gotta get it covered, so that's my only concern.
So, I've heard varied opinions, Cindy indicating that everything on the list holds priority in her opinion. Would it, for the benefit of the group, we could try to tighten some budgetary numbers if we could bid the excavation project, bring you an actual bid back, or at least authorize opportunity for bid and move that forward. But take it as 0, knowing when we come back in October, we spend some time between now and the October meeting getting your questions answered,
Yes.
So we can
so that
move
you're
on.
prepared to
Yes.
vote on this with minimal
Capital-
discussion.
Yes, a capital improvement project list.
Just because the game changer is gonna be that 325, because if it's a lot higher, then
Right.
we're gonna have to knock something out.
Right.
But
And I've met
it looks
with,
priority.
I've met with 2 cruisemen already, and both of them have come with a lot lower numbers in that 200 ballpark, 2 to 225. It just determines, unfortunately, I might take that back. We live in a national park, our school is located in a national park. We have our watershed to deal with, and we have our 30-year, flood to deal with, so depending on how BNF designs it, determines the cost at the end of the day. So just moving dirt, sure, we can get down to 225. So it's
securing dirt and somebody else giving a blessing to the
Right.
plan, so it's not running off on something else.
Right.
Because right now, what we're trying to get you is a chat parking lot, not a paved parking lot.
Right.
So, and we'd really like for all of that to have an opportunity to settle in and harden and then pave it. It would be our intentionality is to at least let it get set up before we do anything else. We are going to design a proposal that at least paves the road all the way through into the Ag-Ride parking lot, so that the roadway that people are driving on will be paved.
So you're gonna get
That's a
us
great
costs.
plan. I think it's a great plan.
Yep. All right, so we ready to vote?
Great.
Motion to pass the annual financial report for 2019-2020 and budget for 2020-2021. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say aye. Motion carries 5-0. And on to the next one.
Motion to hire the following for the correlating positions for the remainder of 2020-2021 school year: Kimberly Cosby, Faces Aid, and Amanda Cobb, Faces Aid.
Yeah, anybody got any questions? I do have a question on that. So have we had paid aides before like this through the school, or is it, but this is paid through Faces money? Oh, okay, okay. Anybody else have questions? No? Okay. So the motion to hire the following for the correlating position for the remainder of the 2020-2021 school year: Kimberly Cosby, Amanda Cobb. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say aye. Motion carries 5-0. We are adjourned.